Alright guys, so today I'm going to go over how to set up the pump if you've never set up a pump before, so that way, this is the best way to do it, at least for me, so that way I know it works good for me and I get the best performance out of the pump whenever I'm draining the tanks, so that way I can get it done fast. On the suction side of the hose, it has to be a heavy duty hose. It has to be a thick, heavy duty hose because the pump will collapse. A normal garden hose or a medium duty hose, the pump will collapse it and then you'll just get kinks and then you're not going to get any water out. So must be a heavy duty hose. You don't need a long hose for your heavy duty side just because you're going to be moving around and you don't want to be losing prime through this big old hose and repriming this big giant hose. So I cut it down to about this size here, a couple feet, maybe 8 to 9 feet is really all you need. So that way you can just prime it with a water bottle and you don't have to run to a sink or anything crazy to prime the hose. So I'll just get a knife and I'll cut the hose here. Hang on 2 seconds, I'll set that up. Hopefully you can see well. I don't have any fancy today. Oh. There we go. Just get your knife, cut your hose. If there's multiple techs in your area that are going to need these, you only need a couple feet of the heavy duty hose, so you'll have plenty of left over, so that way you can just cut them off a piece, and then all they have to do is buy the connectors to put on. Okay, so now that we have the hose cut off, we've got this empty, or this heavy duty hose, but we need to put the connectors on it. So at hardware store, they'll have these replacement connectors to repair a damaged hose. So you'll unscrew these, slide this end into the hose all the way, open this up, put it around it, and then screw it back on as tight as you can to hold it in place. So after you're done, you end up with 8 to 10 feet, about 8 feet of your heavy duty hose. It's thick enough that you know it's not going to collapse on you when you put the suction onto the hose. You purchased your hose repair kit, or the hose repair, and get the heavy duty one, so that way it doesn't fall apart on you. Make sure it has the gasket on there. And you're going to want the female end. The opposite end you still want to be just raw hose, that way this end can snake into the tanks. This heavy duty hose is pretty thick, so whenever you do use it and you snake it into the tanks, sometimes putting a little bit of WD-40 or some lube here just to help it get through the rubber on the tanks. Obviously doing it right now doesn't help you, so just whenever you do it, with how thick it is and the rubber, it helps to lubricate this a little bit whenever you're snaking it into the tanks. So after you get your female end put onto your hose for the suction side, the short one that you need, it's going to be a shame to waste this big heavy duty hose just because we cut off that short bit. So I put the female end connection back on here, repair this hose. This hose is still a good functioning working hose. We can use that for draining water, or you can use it for, continue on, cut on another piece if there's another tech that needs another piece, whatever you need it for. So put the end in there, put this around it, tighten it down. Okay. So how it works, I'm going to get the female outside right here. I push it all the way in. I'll make sure it's all the way in there. And with my little gun, I'll take these screws out. Set in. I'll put the bottom side on there. Push it in tight. Just get the threads on, and then do the same thing the other side. Just get the threads on, and then go back and forward so that way it doesn't pinch on one side. And once you got it, make sure you tighten it all the way down so you have a good seal on there and you're not leaking water everywhere. There we go. And we got a good working hose. And then we're set. And then we got our hose there. Okay, so now we're going to be setting up the pump. This is the one that I like to use. I really enjoy this pump. It works pretty well for me as long as you set it up the right way. It'll work good for you. They sell it at Lowe's, Home Depot. It's nothing crazy. It's a half horsepower pump. I realized the other side was in Spanish, so it is in English, so it's just a portable transfer pump, half horsepower. Okay, so when you open your pump, it's going to have the threads for the in and the out, and it's going to have the plug here. Okay, you're going to need to wrap the threads with Teflon tape and the plug with Teflon tape. The instructions are going to tell you to take the plug off to prime the pump every time. We're not going to follow those instructions. We do need to prime the pump every time, but if you're constantly taking this plug in and out, you're going to constantly have to keep rewrapping it with Teflon tape. So instead, we're going to be priming it from the short hose. That way we could just pour water in through there. I do it through a water bottle. It works pretty well. That way you don't have to constantly use tools to take this on and off, put Teflon tape on there and using tools. It's easier to just use a water bottle, pour water into the hose, and it's good to go. So right now what we're going to do is put Teflon tape onto these, into this, and then we're going to install them onto here. So if you've never put Teflon tape onto something, really easy. You just get your Teflon tape, pull out, you just set it onto the threads, and then you just slowly just wrap around, letting the Teflon tape grip onto the grip of the threads. That way you can just coat the threads with the Teflon tape. That way it creates a seal whenever you thread it in. That way water doesn't pass through and you have a bunch of leaks. And whenever you're done, you just give it a little tug, and it just falls off right there. And then you just go on to the next piece. So we'll Teflon tape all the threads. I'll do both sides. You'll end up re-threading the hose side at least, every so often, because when you take the hose on and off, it's going to eat up the Teflon tape. But it's worth redoing just so that way it prevents you from having any leaks, and you'll get better performance out of there. There's no air coming in or out, and no water coming in or out, and your hose or your pump will act a lot better for you if you have a good seal on there. That's it for the Teflon tape. Okay, so after you got all the Teflon set up, we just need to thread them in here. On here there's two threads. There's the thicker threads that goes to the hose, the machine threads that goes into here. So just gonna thread it in, and once you have it threaded, as much as you can go by hand, do the rest with some channel locks or a wrench. It's got grip on here for it. Just be careful that you don't mess up the actual threads while you're doing it. So get it as tight as you can, just so that way you don't have any water or air leaking. Okay, so what we ended up with, we got the water pump. The little sticker showing you in and out. So this is your suction side. This is how that's coming out. So you're going to put the short, heavy-duty suction hose on here, thread it on, snake that into the tanks. You're going to have a long hose connected here, pumping all the way outside, pumping outside or into a drain or into the deep sink or wherever you're draining to. Sorry, truck. All right, so then whenever you're filling the tanks back up, you're just going to connect your long hose to the sink or the faucet, and then first you're going to run water all the way through it, and so that way the dirty water that's still stuck inside the hose from the tanks cleans out. And then once you have clean water coming out of the hose and you've let it flushed out for a while, then you'll turn it off. I'll get the hose, connect to the sink, then I've got the other end. I'll connect to a valve, and then I'll connect that valve again to my short hose. That way I've got control. I'll snake the hose into the rower. I'll valve it off, then you'll turn it on, fill it up to the 17 mark like we're supposed to. Once it's there, I'll turn the valve off, move to the next tank down the line, so on and so forth. So that way I don't have to sit there and try to kink the hose or worry about turning the hose on or off, whatever. I got the valve here. I can open it up when I need water, turn it off when I don't need water. Again, I put Teflon on there to make sure that I've got a good seal so I'm not leaking hose all over the place, and make sure you've got a good gasket on the inside. And then that should be everything that you need. You've got the short hoses, or you only really need one. You just got to make sure that you have got a valve for it. And then you got your long hose, and you got your pump. Various valves if you need them. You'll also need an extension cord. That way you can move down the line without having to stop and worry about plugging and unplugging the pump. Then only use the ball valve whenever you're filling the tanks, not when you're draining, because whenever you're draining, the ball valve is significantly smaller in diameter than the hose, so you're going to reduce the amount that you're able to drain at a time if you use it while you're draining. So only use the ball valve while you're filling the tanks, not when you're draining.